an intro logic course, you always start by evaluating reasoning that's been written out in English. For example, you might be asked to evaluate the reasoning, James isn't a movie star, thus James isn't both a movie star and a rock star. But soon enough, you'll be introduced to what logicians call a formal language, and you'll be asked to consider reasoning that's written out in that language. For instance, you'll be introduced to this symbol here called the negation sign, which you'll be told you can pronounce not, and this symbol here called the conjunction sign, which you'll be told you can pronounce and then you'll be asked to evaluate some reasoning written out using those symbols, such as not A, thus not A and B. But what's the point of introducing a formal language and then using it instead of English? Why do we do that? Well, it's not just for convenience. It's not just because using a symbol in place of a whole word or phrase saves time and space. The real reason is that English is ambiguous. So when an inference is written out in English, there may be no straightforward way to answer the question of whether that inference is valid simply because there might be different ways to interpret what inference we're being asked to evaluate in the first place. By contrast, the formal language that we'll introduce is designed to be completely unambiguous, so when we use it to describe a bit of reasoning, there can be no question about what inference we're talking about. That allows us to answer the question of whether that inference is valid with just a simple yes or no. Let's look at a few of the ways in which English is ambiguous in order to bring out the problem that creates. We'll start with the word or. It might be hard to imagine how such a simple word like or could be ambiguous, but arguably it is. According to some people, or is ambiguous between an inclusive sense and an exclusive sense. You use the word or in its inclusive sense when by saying A or B, you're saying that at least one of A and B is true, maybe both. For example, suppose I have a brilliant friend, Jane. I might say, Jane will be accepted to Harvard or Jane will be accepted to Yale. Here I'm saying that she'll be accepted to at least one of those schools. If she were accepted to both, I wouldn't take that to at all contradict what I said. On the contrary, that would just prove that I was right. In this instance, I've used the word or in its inclusive sense then. By contrast, you use the word or in its exclusive sense when by saying A or B, you say that exactly one of A and B is true, not both. For example, suppose I know a family with 2 young children and 1 more on the way. I might say, they will renovate their current house or they will move to a bigger one. Here, I expect only one of the 2 things to happen. If somehow both occurred, that would arguably contradict what I said. So in this instance, I've arguably used the word or in its exclusive sense. Now, supposing that or is ambiguous between these 2 different senses, an inclusive sense and an exclusive sense, how does that create a problem? To illustrate the issue, suppose someone asks you to consider the following inference. That farm grows grapes or it grows strawberries. That farm grows grapes, thus that farm does not grow strawberries. You're asked, is the inference from the premises to the conclusion valid? Well, if or is ambiguous in the way that we've talked about, then there are 2 ways to interpret the first premise. If or is being used in the exclusive sense in that first premise, then it's asserting that the farm grows exactly one of the 2 fruits, grapes or strawberries. In combination with the second premise that the farm grows grapes, that entails that the farm does not grow strawberries. So if or is being used in the exclusive sense in the first premise, then we have a valid inference. By contrast, suppose that or is being used in the inclusive sense in the first premise. Then it's saying that the farm grows at least one of the 2 fruits. And in that case, the inference is not valid For in that case, the premises might both be true without the conclusion being true. If the farm does indeed grow both grapes and strawberries, and that's exactly the result we would get. That would make both of the premises true and the conclusion false. So if someone asks us to consider the reasoning, that farm grows grapes or it grows strawberries, that farm grows grapes, thus that farm does not grow strawberries, and ask us whether that inference is valid, we can't give a straightforward yes or no answer. We have to say, it depends. It depends on what inference you're actually asking me about. Because there are two ways to understand the first premise, and the answer changes depending on which interpretation we go with. Our formal language will not have the word or in it. Instead, it will have a symbol called the disjunction sign, and we'll stipulate that A disjunction B means that at least one of A and B is true. So when we write out a piece of reasoning in our formal language using the disjunction sign, there won't be any question about what's intended. Now, when we read sentences of our formal language out loud, we're going to pronounce the disjunction sign as or, so we will read A disjunction B out loud as A or B, but we're doing that because it would be cumbersome to always say A disjunction B. We just pronounce it as A or B because that's easier to say, and because the meaning that we've attached to the disjunction sign matches up with one core way in which the word or is used. Next, let's look at the word and. Once again, it might be hard to imagine how such a simple word like and could be ambiguous, but arguably it is. Why might someone say that it is? Well, first, notice that if you stick the word and between two statements, oftentimes you just express that both of those statements are true. For instance, discussing the political events of the day with a friend, I might say, Joe Biden gave a speech in Pennsylvania and Kamala Harris attended a town hall in Wisconsin. Here, the most natural reading of what I've said is simply that both things occurred. It would have made no difference if, describing today's political happenings, I'd instead said, Kamala Harris attended a town hall in Wisconsin and Joe Biden gave a speech in Pennsylvania. That would again simply communicate that both of those things took place today. But arguably, the word and sometimes functions a bit differently. Sometimes it seems to mean and then. For instance, suppose your friend attends a Justin Bieber concert and reports that at the concert, Bieber abruptly walked off stage and the audience booed. Here, your friend seems to be saying not just that both things happened, but that first Bieber abruptly walked off stage and then the audience booed. If your friend instead reported the audience booed and Bieber abruptly walked off stage, then they would seem to be giving an entirely different picture of what happened at the concert. So arguably, and can be used in two different ways in English. The statement A and B can simply assert that A and B both happened, as in the first example, or the statement A and B can seemingly assert the claim A happened and then B happened, as in the second example. So now suppose that you're asked whether the following reasoning is valid. Eve became pregnant and married Adam, thus Eve married Adam and became pregnant. Well, if the word and is ambiguous in the way that we've just described, then there's no straightforward yes or no answer to whether that reasoning is valid. Because if and is being used in the first way, where A and B means simply that both A and B occurred, then both the premise and the conclusion are saying the same thing, and so the reasoning is valid. But if and is being used in the second way, where A and B means that A happened and then B happened, then the premise and the conclusion are saying different things, and the conclusion doesn't follow from the premise. So we can't give a simple yes or no verdict on the validity of the inference when it's spelled out using the English word and, because in that case a question can be raised about exactly what inference we're being asked to evaluate in the first place. In our formal language, we won't have the word and. Instead, we'll have a symbol called the conjunction sign, and we'll stipulate that A conjunction B means simply that both A and B are true. So when we write out a piece of reasoning in our formal language using the conjunction sign, there won't be any room to question what was intended. Now, when we read sentences of our formal language out loud, we're going to pronounce the conjunction sign as and. So we'll read A conjunction B out loud as A and B. But again, we're doing that just because it would be cumbersome to always say A conjunction B. By definition, A conjunction B means simply that both A and B are true. We just pronounce it as A and B because that's easier to say, and because the meaning we've attached to the conjunction sign matches up with one core way in which the word and is used. Finally, let's look at one more example of ambiguity in English. A sentence might be ambiguous not because there's some specific word in it that's open to multiple readings, but because there are multiple ways to parse the overall structure of the sentence. For example, consider the sentence, Jane is an avid reader and she likes doing crosswords or she likes watching reality TV. There are two ways to interpret that sentence. On the first reading, the sentence definitively asserts that Jane is an avid reader, and it's somewhat non-committal about what other activities she likes, only going as far as saying that she also likes either crosswords or reality TV. By contrast, on the second reading, the sentence doesn't definitively assert that Jane is an avid reader. Instead, it presents two options. One is that Jane is an avid reader who likes doing crosswords, and the other is that Jane likes watching reality TV, and it says that one or the other of those two options holds. So there is what logicians would call a scope ambiguity in the original sentence. On the first way of reading the sentence, the or joins the statement, Jane likes doing crosswords, with the statement, Jane likes watching reality TV. That's the scope of the or. It joins those two statements. And then the and joins the statement, Jane is an avid reader, with the statement, Jane likes doing crosswords or Jane likes watching reality TV. That's the scope of the and. It joins those two statements. By contrast, on the second way of reading the sentence, the and joins the statement, Jane is an avid reader, with the statement, Jane likes doing crosswords. On this reading, that's the scope of the and. It's joining those two statements. And then the or joins Jane is an avid reader and Jane likes doing crosswords with Jane likes watching reality TV. On the second reading, that's the scope of the or. It's joining those two statements. Since English sentences are susceptible to scope ambiguities, when we write out reasoning in English, we have yet another way for questions to arise about exactly what reasoning is being described. In the formal language that we'll introduce, we'll insist that parentheses are always used to clearly indicate the scope of every sentential connective. So, for example, if you want to form the disjunction of a statement A with a statement B, you would write open parentheses A, disjunction B, close parentheses. The parentheses make clear that the scope of that disjunction. It's joining the statement A with the statement B. If you then want to conjoin a further statement C with that disjunction, then you would write open parentheses C, conjunction A disjunction B, close parentheses. By contrast, if you first want to conjoin C with A, then you would write open parentheses C, conjunction A, close parentheses. If you then want to form the disjunction of that with B, then you would write open parentheses, C conjunction A, disjunction B, close parentheses. Once again, the parentheses serve to make clear the scope of each connective. The conjunction, in this case, is joining C with A, and then the disjunction is joining that compound statement with the statement B. You wouldn't be allowed in our formal language to write simply C conjunction A disjunction B without any parentheses because that would contain a scope ambiguity. Is the disjunction sign joining the statements A and B, and then the conjunction is joining C with that disjunction? Or is the conjunction sign joining C with A, and then the disjunction is joining that with B? That's the kind of ambiguity that we want to eliminate. The key advantage that the formal language we introduce will have over English is precisely that the formal language, unlike English, will be entirely free of ambiguity. And that ensures that when we write out a piece of reasoning using our formal language, there won't be any question about what reasoning we're trying to describe.